5, 4, 3, 2. There is a question, comment. Thank you. Question, recommendation. No point of order. We are in order. Okay. Let's deal with those two. Ma'am, please start over there. Where is the microphone? Okay.
It's with me. Thank you. Ntate Mofokeng, you touched a little bit on Chapter 4, but you maybe glossed over it a little bit, probably because of the time constraint. I think we would be interested in this room for you to just elaborate a little bit on Chapter 4.
Is that the Chapter 4 of the procurement bill? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think my question is an addition, I think, to Klamalani's one. It's, you spoke to set-asides, Greg, and for me as an industry person, I'm wondering what is the approach in terms of how you're going to do it. I think it's good and well that we're aware that it's happening, there's a conversation, but the how. Why I'm asking the question how is simple. It's very easy to exclude businesses on technical terms, not necessarily competence and track record, but certain key issues within procurement, how procurement is being designed. And I'm just wondering that thinking has to come through, and that we have these conversations in our frustrated positions at times where businesses our size are being excluded from procurement processes on technical compliance issues, which we have not had the opportunity to have been in the industry long enough to be responsive to some of the opportunities. So the how is very important, and that appreciation and understanding by the organization is necessary. So thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Was there still another hand struggling to rise? Okay. Thank you. The microphone can, yeah.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and thanks to the speakers. Program Director, mine is on the transformation. We speak about this several times, and it has just become one of those things that we talk about. When Gregory was acknowledging leaders of state-owned entities, I think he mentioned about 7 or 10. And what always come to mind is having, and all of them, by the way, I'll call them, historically disadvantaged people as I saw them standing. With the kind of people that are running government, is there anything wrong with us? Why are we still struggling with issues of transformation, particularly making sure that we use those positions to affirm black contractors in the industry, in everything that we do? Why are we so battling? Is it the issue of, the taxi industry? I'll tell you why I'm saying that. My dad owned taxis, and we always believed that we are good people. But the moment you get to the steering wheel of the taxi, you're just like all of them. Is it the same issue? The moment these people get positions in this government institution, do they become something else? Why are we battling? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we can deal with those in that sequence.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me start questioning Mehlami. Madam, Chapter 4 deals with preferential procurement, essentially. And this is how you preference so that transformation can happen. Obviously, we don't want to have a blow-by-blow account here, but it really goes to town in terms of how the government must do preferential procurement, essentially, and ensure that using state procurement as a lever, we can achieve transformation. So I think, let me just leave it at that broad stroke. We can obviously, go into it and look at a blow-by-blow account. But what is also important is that what sits there, a lot of, clauses that provision for certain things to happen. That's why it's important for us to look at investing our time in developing regulations, because that's where we are going to then stipulate how these things must happen. The issue around the set-aside, you needed to have a provision to set aside. And I think I've mentioned, for instance, on the issue of the BI, that we are we are investing in this entity so that we can, reindustrialize our economy, get guys to start factories and manufacture and supply. But there has not always been the support coming from the client side, because they said, well, look, I mean, we don't want to be taken to court simply because we are now setting aside and there's no legislation that supports this. Well, there was provision, just that it was not utilized. You can get exemptions from triple PFA and PFMA in certain instances if you want to achieve certain things. But we found that people did not have the will, to go down that route. So this becomes the easier way of saying, but it's in your procurement legislation, so you can be able to do it. So this is not, a provision that people will then utilize to exclude companies based on technical, reasons. No, definitely not. So we have to be very careful. And colleagues, I always say that as the BBCB, we don't see all the tender documents. So we don't see all these exclusionary requirements that are there. It is yourselves as members that must make us aware of this exclusionary requirements in tender documents so that we can then act. We can only act if you give us information. So where there are exclusions, requirements that are really discriminatory, and you can see that, when you have a feeling that a tender is designed for somebody, why born about tender in a Norman? So you must bring that to us so that we can then be able to challenge that. So it's definitely not about technical exclusions, but just to say, how do we empower people? Certain categories of people that must be supported in order for them to grow. Interesting enough, and maybe the DP and the TG must not with me on this one. We are having discussions, for instance, with Sandra on set-asides for contractor development purposes. We are even saying to Sandra, even the grade 9s, as long as they are black-owned, they must be empowered still. Because our grade 9s are not at that level that we want them to be. So you can see where we are going. So we are saying this set-asides must also empower what we will consider, big black players, because we know, comparatively speaking, we are still not as good as the established companies. So these are some of the things that we want to drive with the set-aside provisions. Interesting enough, I was also having another conversation. There are a lot of conversations happening. And the conversation was around the former Minister of Finance and Governor of the Reserve Bank, Tito Mboweni. So the conversation was, he's one of those guys, thinkers and doers. I said, no. You see, when people talk on Twitter, it's different. When they are now in government, you see. On Twitter, he will talk about establishment of a sovereign wealth fund. And then they give him, President Ramaphosa calls him back and says, you go to National Treasury. All of a sudden, he's now developed amnesia now. He didn't know about this sovereign wealth fund, all of those things. And then his tenure ended. He exited. After exiting, he goes back to Twitter and writes this thing. I say, when you were in power, you didn't do these things. It is only when you are outside that you now start talking about these things. And this I'm saying as an example that I think our colleagues in the SOEs and other government institutions must really take to heart. You have power. Colleagues, you have power. Use it to change all these issues that we want to change. Use it to drive the transformation agenda. Because one day, when you are outside of that power, you'll now be attending like some of the SOEs, former CEOs of some of these SOEs who are now part of the BBC and Bbcbe, they're running here. But when they were CEOs, they did not drive these things. Now you are out of power. You lost an opportunity. So yes, I agree with you. Sometimes being in an institution does change you. Keep that spirit of wanting things to change. Keep that, still be an activist in your position. Make things happen where you are. We can't be talking about numbers, the SSCPCMP that don't make sense. You are no president. You have power. Really, you have power now.
Thank you. I think we can move the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When the guilty ones are taken to task, colleagues, you have power. Use it. Shall I say? There's power. Let's use it. Because once we are outside, then we realize, hey, Just like a lot of politicians who are realizing now, when I was a minister, they are out now. So use the power that we have, colleagues. Let's drive this transformation agenda. Thank you very much.
Great stuff.
Thank you. I think for me, I'll just answer one around that issue around transformation. I think the issue that is there as well is a systematic one, in that some of these leaders, when they go into these organizations, state organizations, they find a system that is already not structured for empowerment and transformation. And sometimes it becomes difficult for them to fight on a system alone. And this is where organizations like ourselves need to come to the party and be able to support some of these leaders to be able then to start changing those systematic issues that they have. Because they can't do that internally. We have seen it. Even if somebody wants to do it, they find so much resistance internally that they just go with the fold because there is no one supporting them. And some of the legislative changes that we need to put into place and lobby for, like the Public Procurement Act, becomes an enabler. But it doesn't mean that we must let those leaders only run with it. We need to actually support them in the fight that they're going to get. And there the opportunity lies for us, especially around the regulations, around the public-private partnership regulations. We need then to be the ones that contribute to them to support these leaders. And I sometimes feel for them that it is difficult, although that they want to do things, the systematic framework itself doesn't allow them to do it. And I think that is the balance that we need to put in. There are people that are willing to transform, but they need support from the outside, organizations like ours, to start putting pressure in the system itself to be able to become an enabler. Thank you.
One point, colleagues, when I was mandated by the Bbcbe leadership to make this presentation, I was guided on those 3 points, so I couldn't go to town. But I think Chief Carrington made a very, very, very important, submission on his report around the triple Ps. And colleagues, I want to re-emphasize this. I think the Bbcbe has been running with this message now for the past 5 years, to say, let us look at what is coming, and let us, right now, do the necessary work to position our companies. Colleagues, triple Ps are coming. Triple Ps are coming, right? At the moment, Muhlompetlale did say that we've contributed towards the inputs on the triple P framework, right? National Treasury is about to finalize that. Once that is done, work on the other 2 pieces of legislation is almost done as well. In fact, the one is done, Regulation 28 of the Pension Fund Act, to allow pension funds to increase their investment into infrastructure projects. That's done. DORA is the other one that is about to be finished as well, and I think it's done now. We must just get confirmation, which is the Division of Revenue Act, to allow government then to be able to, allocate the resources when it comes to ensuring that the investors do get their return on investment. Once the triple P framework is done, the PPA will be done in the regulations. I can assure you now, you will see a lot of movement of projects that will now be done under the triple P framework. If we are not prepared, you are going to sit and watch for tenders, you will not see them coming. You are not going to see tenders coming. So I want to urge you once again, both consultants and contractors, let's start getting together. Let's start networking with banks, with fund managers, asset managers. Let's start creating those partnerships now so that when the shift happens, we are ready. Don't be caught behind the curve. We are giving you information. Please take it seriously. All of these pieces of legislation, we have made inputs as the BBC and the Bbcbe. That is the triple P framework, the amendments to the DORA, as well as amendments to the Regulation 28 of the Pension Fund Act. All of these are being amended to make sure that we pave the way for a seamless implementation of triple Ps. Thank you very much.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Do I have another round of hands? The last one? 1, 2. Okay, then I'm closing off. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Do I have to stand and introduce myself again?
Yeah, you may quickly.
Okay. So, Chris Campbell, CEO of CISA, Consulting Engineers South Africa. I got just two quick questions. I'm a bit hesitant about the second one because it may be deemed to be controversial. I may get marched out.
We can socialize it outside as well as an extension.
So, I think I like what I see on the board. They say skills development. I would like to know how we can do more and work more collaboratively with Bbcbe in the skills pipeline. Now, let's forget about tertiary education. We're not even getting enough young learners through basic education. And I think the missing link there is lobbying, not for the industry at the tail end, but lobbying at basic education. Let's fix that system up, because not enough of our youth are getting the basic education that you will require in your businesses and in your companies to deliver the infrastructure that we need. So I'd like to make a special appeal for us to join forces there, because I think for the longest time we're working on, we're not looking at generations to come. We're only thinking of the now. We need to work on the future, because our youth, we are doing them a disservice by not acting on their behalf.
Thanks, Chris. That's the first question.
The second one is, and please don't interpret this as being any anti-transformation stance, but I would like us to work more closely together with Bbcbe so that we can make sure that the detractors to transformation, those who are against it, don't find easy loopholes to challenge it legally. Because we keep making 2 steps forward and then you get pushed 20 steps backwards. We need to get on this journey sustainably going forward, and I would like for us to work together more closely on how can we make it more robust and watertight so that we don't sit with these complexities. We want to move forward in life, get our transformation on the road, and not find the detractors, and there will always be. This is, unfortunately, racism is a global thing, and it still exists. It's alive and well in this country.
Okay, that's a call for collaboration. Thank you. Let's take that hand over there. Mr. Shezi, I'm going to just request that you note the question about skills development also in the next panel. You can also touch on it in case we don't cover it sufficiently.
Thobela Maponya. I'll end it there on the introduction side. Mine, program director and the panelists, is linked more to the Public Procurement Act as we have it, and specifically Chapter 4. I know that some of the things the speakers have already probably touched on, but mine is more on the implementation. We've seen how with the triple PFA, as we gathered steam towards the public procurement bill, that there were already court actions that were taking place. Parallel to the public procurement bill taking its footsteps, and when we were working with it through the BBC's head of policy, we within the youth, when I was still youth then, worked within the national youth policy to ensure that we include the economic transformation, and the set-asides already now included in anticipation to the procurement bill. But what we found challenges in is on the implementation, as Chief Carrington said. My question or probably comment is probably on the roping in, whether we were going to bring in colleagues from BBC, in the likes of Pabasa, BLA, and them, on the court challenges that we find ourselves always engaged in terms of implementation of that Chapter 4, because I think part of that is also ourselves. We have challenges in industry in terms of them having to put up their regulations in terms of procurement policy, but also internally as colleagues around the table in terms of how we include ourselves, whether young people, women, persons with disability, because those are the sectors that are covered in Chapter 4, in terms of ensuring that in the procurement spends, they get to have their own set-asides in there, because once you speak of set-asides in that, then there's always litigation, there's always court cases, and we find ourselves, well, I'm still counting myself in there, are excluded from that process. But the last part was linked probably to what Chris said. collaboration. Previously, we've put up programs and proposals in terms of ensuring that from the grade 9s till your grade 1, from the professionals till your contractors, manufacturers, and everybody else, we come together in ensuring that we are able to execute these projects. But when you come to the actual ground itself, when we have to do them, and we look at the whole procurement of these
Please put a question mark.
we don't get that expression. So program director,
Yes.
maybe you'll allow me, as the former SG of the youth, I'm speaking for youth now, that element
please lend
is not being addressed. But Chair, on that end of the Public Procurement Act, we need that implemented, not just as legislation that is just going to sit and collect dust. We need that being enacted properly, so that all the elements, even the Tirisano Fund that we may look at, and the VRPs, being actually implemented in that form, so that whatever that has been put in the set aside, because we work parallel with the procurement bill to ensure that the NYP is already clear, NYP 2030.
Okay, Tobela, this is what we'll do. Ne? I will prioritize you during networking. I'll link you to make sure that this is addressed sufficiently. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me start because Mufugeng is going to take long.
No, he's no longer going to respond. You can
Okay.
cover it.
I'm just going to answer one around training. A few years ago, we were quite happy when the Department of Basic Education hinted and did public participation and consultation around the dual system, which would have allowed for almost all schools to have a dual system around technical and non-technical training, and from a lower level grades. So, but unfortunately that didn't actually materialize. And hence one of the activities that we have put in as an organization around schools of specialization, it is actually targeted at basic education, so that we can start identifying a model that can be applied to existing schools, where then we can have skills for the future. So that is one of the areas that as an organization we are looking at. How do we support a school of specialization around the built environment itself? So it's an activity that we've started and that we are linking back to the Bbcbe Academy, and also the aspiration that the Premier had put in establishing schools of specialization through the different sectors. So it is definitely something that needs to be done quite aggressively and with collaboration from everyone in the sector, so that we don't leave these youngsters behind. But I think the policy framework as well has got to be put in place to allow it to be replicated. And it is a challenge I must accept.
Chris, I think one of the things, colleagues, is that we are about to start the negotiations on the construction sector charter targets, right? So the targets are going to be renegotiated. What we can look at there is how do we drive further resources to this kind of programs, schools of specialization, especially in the built environment, so that we can then impact the throughput on the other side. And maths and science, of course, are very critical for the professional side. So we need to look at that. If you look at what we have right now in terms of the codes, we've said if you don't invest enough in training, we said it's not enough for you just to be black. If you don't invest in skills development, we discount to one level. So we're going to tighten those screws, because we need to use legislation to channel the resources where they are most needed. So I'm just saying, watch the space. We will allocate more resources using the construction sector charter codes towards the education system. Look at the entire value chain. Because as Chris is saying now, we are fighting at the moment, but it's after the fact. We are fighting now on employment equity targets for the industry. So we are fighting later on. So let's look at the entire pipeline and see how do we invest in there. Partnership to deal with detractors of transformation. Definitely, Chris, I think we are available as the BBC and the Bbcbe on that, so that we can then be able to deal with this issue. You see, we don't have a problem when we know that this individual is a problem, right? As an individual, we can deal with that. But when they hide behind institutions, it becomes a problematic, where you now find an institution is the one that is fighting the battle, as taking a racist stance, just like Saikelikha. By the way, Saikelikha came to the BBC conference. They were very clear. They said, no, you must just know, we've won this battle at the Constitutional Court. The bigger battle is that we want to do away with BBB laws. So they were very clear, right? So we don't want other organizations to join that fray. So if there is an offer, DP, from CISA that let's work together to deal with the detractors, I say we're available.
Thank you.
Let's
VP.
work together to do that. Finally, Mabonya, we have taken a stance at the BBC level that we need to have our own litigation unit. Just last week, we were putting the final touches with the lawyers. Zondi from KZN wanted a Zulu name man. So, so we wanted the one that shows that we can fight impi or something. Actually, we find out, man, those names are taken, man. We're serious. We're about to fight here. You know, so we couldn't find the nice Zulu one. So we settled for the Sotho one, Ntoyamurugo. We're going to fight for the economy. So that's going to our litigation unit. And what is going to be clear that is that anything and everything that is there to block transformation, we must fight it. So we are bringing our own AfriForum now to come and fight the other side. So Zondi Mane, we couldn't find something Zulu, Impinya or something.
I saw me,
But we've got into Amutla Teke. We wanted all those ones.
We are fine. Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause to our panel? Okay. Great.